there's a good point there too about like when, like at what point in the stack do you bring a new guy into the kind of deeper stuff? I think a clip like the one Drug Cell had me play earlier, that's like a great wide net, right? Casting a wide net. That message resonates with a ton of people, and it gives voice to a lot of their concerns that they can't articulate themselves about the dissatisfaction they have with the world around them. But if you start with the deep truth about
Yeah.
Pandora, the nature of Eve, right? Like, no, that's not a wide net. That's not a wide net. So if you start with a wide net that even, I hate to say it, but it would even include women, but then, you know, they kind of work into the system, they get invested. There's a lot of research that was done in the mid-century about choice theory, and it was crazy. Like, people would be presented with a table full of appliances, like say 30 appliances, and they'd tell them to rank each appliance in terms of desirability, and like 1 through 30, right? And then they bring them back in a couple weeks later, and they'd only offer them like 5 or 6 of those appliances all throughout the range of their choices. And they'd be told you can pick one and take it home with you and keep it. And then a couple weeks later, they'd bring them back in. So say you picked appliance number 12, you know, and that was maybe the highest one that you had rated or whatever, but it's the highest one available for you. And then when they reevaluate or ask them again to rate the 30 appliances, number 12 was now number 1. You know, the one they went home with was number 1. It's like Ford and Chevy and Dodge guys aren't Ford and Chevy and Dodge guys before they bought their first truck. There was a time when they thought, do I need a Ford? Do I need a Chevy? Do I need a Dodge? It could come down to a million things: dealer availability, price, color, whatever, right? Trade-in value. And then all of a sudden you're a Chevy guy once you have one. And Ford is found on road dead and all this other stuff. So, you know, if you can bring them in through some kind of broader means, they'll want to stay. And they will give away a whole lot to stay. And it's not manipulative or whatever, it's just human nature.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that kind of plays into like a sunk cost fallacy, or like, you know, an attachment of the decisions that you made to the person that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that could easily be psychologically manipulable. Well, I mean, and you could imagine someone that like made a decision that would be, you know, you wouldn't have high social standing in a Christian society if, you know, you were someone engaged in, you know, sinful activity. You could imagine it'd be difficult for converting some of those people, right?
Right, but don't think about it in terms of manipulating them. Think about it in like,
No,
we have we have a mandate to win, right?
It could be.
I know, but
That's
we
what I'm
have a
saying.
mandate to win, and it's worth making the right moves as much as we can to do that, right? And so that's not manipulation so much as it's just a good way to communicate with people, because once they're in a group, this, you know, the weird standards of like you said, of sunk cost fallacy and all this other like grug brain stuff that we don't really quite understand but act on, they're going to take over no matter what. But you know, it's worth thinking about until there's some kind of guidance from above, and not to say that there isn't, but you know, until the word comes down from on high about how we're supposed to comport ourselves and how, you know, we're supposed to represent the movement, then we need to use our best judgment and really think about how to do that before we just act based on what we see other people doing and getting responses that are positive for, like, you, oh look, you know, Right Wing Watch gets 800,000 views on this clip. Maybe the wrong lesson to take away from that is I need to clip that same kind of content and put it out there. You're kind of just becoming Right Wing Watch at that point. I don't know if that's necessarily an asset. It's all well and good to joke and whistle past the graveyard about entities like Right Wing Watch, but that may not be the right move for everybody to go out there and emulate and try to get 800,000 views of video for themselves.
Like,
Yeah, and I think
cost, or you have all these psychological tricks that explains like, oh, Dodge guys were Dodge guys until they had a Dodge, and it's like it's a coping mechanism, whatever it is. Well, like when I was watching Nick early on, like I agree with an overwhelming majority of his content. It's like, okay, I'm following this, and then he says something that's like way harder than I've heard before, and I'm like, I winced at him, like, sheesh, like, I mean, I like everything else. That maybe that's a little too far for me, but that wasn't the first thing I heard from him, and it wasn't 50% of his content. It wasn't 80. It was like, you know, every once in a while he drops a little chip, and you pick it up, and you're like, what is this? And you get eased into these things. Whereas, like, if clip number 1 is like, you know, something outrageous, like it's like, okay, this is just like harsh to the senses. Like, this is a bit much.
Yeah.
but you know, you get eased into it, and like the things I used to wince at, it's like I say them like very nonchalantly. It's like, yeah, basically I believe this this X, Y, Z for this reason. And like I've become him, you know, I say things that other people wince at.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a total non sequitur, but one of the things I admire the most about Nick, and I draw a lot of strength from, and I think about and reflect on all the time and kind of check myself with, is that Nick holds really high standards for himself and for other people. Like that. You know, I even like how that permeates as much, to the extent that it does, through even the cozy chat in the audience. Like, you know, if you're out of line in front of a couple hundred guys, like, they're going to check you. And that doesn't mean that you are going to do that if not for them, but it's just it's just present. You know, so I really like that. And that's, you know, Angloid-Saxon, you were talking about the kind of fallacy of individualism and what it leads to. And it's just such a perfect example of how freedom can really come from discipline. And that's just enabled by a group with high standards.